Welcome to From Our Generation, where we uncover the ideas and events that shape the world we live in today. I'm Crom Carmichael.
And I'm Mike Hassel.
Together we'll explore the past to better understand the present, because history isn't just about what happened, it's about how you think about it. Well, Rush, it is May 15th, 2026, and our good friend and my good friend Mike Hassel for many years is traveling, and he'll be gone for about a month. And so you've been nice enough to agree to sit in, and we're going to have a lot of fun.
Yes, indeed.
Because you're the one who is coming up with the topics that you want to discuss. And we had a little preview before we started, and so I think the discussions will be very, very interesting.
Yes, indeed.
And I think it fits nicely in the title of the podcast, From Our Generation, because we are at least one full generation separated, and maybe, unfortunately for me, two.
No, it's good. It's wisdom. It's wisdom.
So, I was just talking about my age. So, at any rate, by the way, fun discussion. Have you reached the age at which you would like to not age anymore?
I think so. I think 30.
30?
Mm-hmm. Well,
Okay.
I have a lot of back problems from a weird previous job I used to have.
Okay.
So I was feeling it at like 27, where I was waking up and it was taking me an extra 45 minutes to get warmed up for the day.
Okay.
And I was having to do my stretches and stuff like that. And now I'm at the age where I feel like I'm not going to get more nimble. I'm not going to get more flexible. My body's not going to bounce back anymore. I can't even have, I quit drinking a while back, but
So
I can't
how
even
old
have
are
one
you?
drink. 34.
34, okay.
Exactly.
Okay,
So
well.
I feel like I can tell that I'm at the age now where when I turn 40, I'm going to look back at this time as the good old days.
Okay.
That's how I feel.
All right.
It might change, but what was that for you?
It was, well, it's already happened. That's true. And I'm going to say it was somewhere between 45 and 50.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Now, I've learned a lot since then because I consider myself to be a lifetime student.
Yeah.
And in some cases, a teacher, but always a lifetime student. And but I think that my intellectual kind of maturity in terms of developing a worldview that made sense to me,
Yeah.
somewhere, and then my physical abilities to do things that I enjoyed doing between 45 and 50. I still could enjoy golf at a reasonably high level. I could play tennis at a level that was consistent with my level of 10 years before. And I could snow ski well enough to get to the bottom of the hill with my knees intact.
There you go.
Which was really the goal for skiing.
Exactly. Just to survive.
A funny story. When we were skiing with our Kathy and I we had another couple, and the Oslins, and their kids and our kids were about 8 to 10 years old, and we're twins. And so my twin son Garrett. One day after skiing, he looked at me and he said, Dad, he said, who's the best skier between Dr. Oslin, Mrs. Oslin, Mommy, and you? And I said, well, the best would be Dr. Oslin. And the second best would either be Mommy or Mrs. Oslin. So he looked at me and very seriously said, so you're the worst skier. I said, well, of those four, I'm the worst skier. And he sits there very pensively and he says, Dad, does that hurt your self-esteem to admit that? It was just hysterical.
That is hilarious.
And I said, Garrett, if skiing was my life's work, yes, it would hurt my self-esteem. And I said, but my goal in skiing is to enjoy the mountain, to enjoy the outdoors, and to end the day with tired thighs, but my knees still intact. And if I've done those things, I've had a good day.
That's right. That's right.
So at any rate, I just when we think about and so you ask me, so 45 to 50, I could still ski as well as I could before.
Yeah.
I could do other things, and my worldview was fairly well formed. And but always being a student, I think, matters. Always being a student matters.
Maybe I was thinking primarily like body and agility and energy levels, but I think you're probably right. I think that I'll probably level out and have my worldview much more solid by 50.
Yeah, I'm just
I
saying.
think that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, and the answer is generally different for women versus men, not by a huge amount, but generally it's a little different. But anyway, it's kind of a fun topic. So let's dig in. What we agreed to do was that you would come up with the topics, and I would more or less kind of respond.
Yes,
and so we'll go from there. We'll do it.
Perfect. Well, I've got a few things that I brought up, and by a few I mean about 30 different topics, and I've dwindled them down to about really just 5.
Okay. And we're going. By the way, I'm going to try to do my best with these topics to try to take them back to the island and our core concepts, because so much in the world right now that's going on is in contradiction to the core principles that made the island function as it did.
Yes.
And I'll be trying to pull that back to that as we have our discussion about current or recent events.
Well, I've got a few, like I said before, I've got a few different stories under a couple of different classifications.
Okay.
One being congressional corruption. We all love that. And then the union rot stories nobody talks about.
Okay.
Right? So just, again, in this podcast, union corruption and just the negative impact unions have on the nation in general has become very.
And you're talking about government employee unions,
yes,
as opposed to, or let me say this, not necessarily in opposition to private sector unions.
Yes, 100%.
But different from. But
exactly.
Okay.
And mainly the incentive structures behind them that cause them to be, what they are. And then the last piece, which we won't really touch on, but I do want to send you some articles because I personally find them interesting, is in the media, speech, and manufactured consent space. So propaganda, all this good stuff, all the stuff we learned from the Germans back in the 40s, which, whether they're good or bad, are, again, very interesting and effective. So not making a case either way. And then the final piece in terms of trust killers for the American people, because my thing is always pulling these stories and researching everything last night and over the past few days, as one, with the help of AI, it helps be able to bring things out that I wouldn't otherwise be able to find. And then also citing everything, which is nice, is I kind of went into the exercise with the number one issue in America from my standpoint, if you're going to just boil it down, be reductive, whatever you want to say, when it comes to the American populace interacting with government and being able to be an effective participant in what America becomes next, is the fact that my generation, the generation beneath me, Gen X as well, the trust in government is at an all-time low.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
That's, if you depend on polls for information, right? But trust in government is an all-time low. I don't think that that's changing anytime soon.
I'm going to expand on that just for a bit and say trust in institutions in general.
That's fair. Yeah.
Are at an all-time low, and I think it'd be interesting to discuss why is that.
Yeah.
And how has it become? How have we reached this point? And how should we think about it in terms of if being able to trust our institutions is a good thing? And I would say that there are certain institutions that we should probably not trust, or we should be very skeptical of constantly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it makes you wonder if trust is the goal, or if it should be a constant, like you're saying, a constant not for tit for tat, but a constant auditing of what's happening in your relationship with the government or any institution that you're connected with. Well, maybe you should never have trust, because trust, in my opinion, and again, I guess there shouldn't be an opinion here. Trust has a definition. But when I think of trust, I think of, I'm not going to count my change at the grocery store when I get my change back from giving you a few dollars.
Okay.
I'm going to default to truth because it's more effective and pragmatic to live my life that way. So I'll just trust the cashier that they give me the right change.
Now, this is interesting. Let's use the grocery store as your example. And whether or not when you walk in the grocery store, whether or not what levels of trust are needed for you to have for your experience in the grocery store when you leave to be such that you want to come back again. So let me digress just for a second. And I think this is true in the restaurant business. if you have a night where the food that you serve is not fresh and in fact causes people to get sick, if you do that for a few nights in a row, there's a really good chance that your restaurant, not because government officials will come and close you down, but because your reputation will spread and you'll go out of business.
Natural selection.
You'll go out of business because your customers will simply not return. But but for those where you like to go to the same restaurant, you have the reasons people go to a nice restaurant is the experience, the food, the service, and the price. And if all of those are in alignment with what their intentions were, their goals were for the evening, they'll say, "I had a nice time. I think I'll come back."
And tell other people about it.
Yeah, exactly. And so in the grocery store space, let's think of the different levels of trust that you have to have. You have to believe, A, that the product that they're offering you is as healthy as you think it is.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a very qualified statement. That was a Mike Reddy statement.
Well, I mean, if you're going to buy super fat ice cream,
exactly,
you know what you're buying, but then you eat it and you go, that was good.
Exactly. Yeah.
At least you kind of know.
Yeah.
If you're in the produce section,
you don't want salmonella.
Then you're also expecting that produce is going to last 2 or 3 days, so that you can eat it rather than die the next day.
Yeah, that's fair.
But you're also if you're going to come back, you think the prices are reasonable or at least competitive, or that you can't find better prices someplace else for that level of quality. Okay, and then you get to the last thing is, if you're paying for your groceries in cash, you just take the cash they give you. You don't really count it.
That's right.
And you leave. And so that, by the way, is how a market economy works.
Yeah.
And it can only work that way. And as you said, it is if the participants in the marketplace selling their goods and services failed to deliver a level of quality for their good or service that if it doesn't meet the needs of the customer, they'll go out of business.
Yeah.
Okay. But in government, the government doesn't go out of business.
That's right.
In fact, the government might say, the reason I can't deliver the level of service that the customer wants is I don't have a large enough bureaucracy. I need more people.
Yeah, I need more people.
Yeah.
Well, it's all incentive based. I mean, that's the thing, is that if you own your own business, and especially right now, the conversation's, I think, a little bit more interesting than it has been over the past 10 years because of how AI is changing everything. Whether that's I'm not even specifically talking about automations within business, or the way content has changed, or the fact that you can't believe user-generated content anymore because it might be an AI facsimile of someone that was just generated with ChatGPT. There's a lot of things that change in that way. But even just in terms of industries that did exist are no longer going to exist anymore, and that's supposed to happen. That can't. It's the same thing as the horses back in the day when the car was coming around, right? There was a huge preponderance of individuals who were pushing against the car being invented, because they owned horses, they owned stables of horses,
they made wagons,
all of these different things. That doesn't mean that was correct and they were on the right side of history, or that it would be good if horses or if cars were never allowed to exist. We all agree that it's nice to have cars, right? From my side, looking at the trust erosion in the United States over, who knows, we can call it 50 years.
So
when would you say it would be 70 years? When do you think, is it after, when's the seminal event in American history where all of a sudden you start to see that drop off?
I'm going to try to answer that question using my lifetime.
Yeah.
Because as we have discussed, there are 3 ways people learn. They learn from personal experiences, they learn some observations in real time, or they learn from history. So I'm going to use the middle one, which is a combination of personal experiences and observation of things going on in real time. The 60s, the Vietnam War, was to me kind of the turning point. The Vietnam War and Nixon.
Yeah.
That was a time where the distrust with government exploded. Not peaked, exploded. Because I think trust in government is actually worse today.
I see what you're saying. Yes, totally.
But
there was a
had
jump.
a giant ratchet up. I mean, in a 10 to 12 year period, the trust in government ratcheted up. Now, the size of government, interestingly enough, didn't immediately ratchet up. But in the 60s, what happened in the 60s was Medicare passed and Medicaid passed. So those were the two first. Social Security had already passed. But that's the first time in the 60s that the government got involved in the payment of the healthcare system. And then it started small, and then it has become bigger and bigger and bigger. And then in 2010, Obamacare was added. Now, I would argue that our trust in our healthcare system, in some ways, it's improving as innovations and kind of quote miracle drugs or things come out. I mean, or miracle ways of doing things. As those things are improving, but on the other hand, because the cost of healthcare is becoming so crushing, and that's been going on now in real earnest for about 20 years. Up until 20 years ago, the cost of healthcare was not considered to be a giant burden, but now it's a huge burden. And so, we could kind of get into what has caused that. We've talked about that on our podcast in healthcare. But look at the media. The trust in the media is at as far as when you ask, do you trust the media? It is at an all-time low.
They earned that.
Yeah. If you ask, do you trust Congress? It's at an all-time low. Now, what's interesting is for somebody who watches CNN or somebody who watches Fox, if you ask, do you trust CNN? If you're an avid watcher of Fox, the answer is yes. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
Okay. People who watch Fox say, I trust Fox. So, and a lot of people will say, I hate Congress, but I like my own congressman.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
So what I'm saying is that when we make a blanket statement that the people are skeptical of Congress, the assumption would be, therefore, the people are going to change Congress.
Yeah.
but then they don't.
Yeah.
So it's that gets into a lot about human nature.
Well, I think Congress people just get better at changing how they communicate to their constituents to get elected. That's what I think. Politics is so similar to marketing in regards. It's kind of like I guess again, to be reductive, marketing, which is kind of where I spend most of my time in trying to understand the historical relevance of what has changed in the past. How were the Mad Men days of advertising? Like, what were the changes that they made back then that made marketing so effective, advertising so effective, but also ubiquitous? How did that change everything? Why are we here now? What happens next? That's where my head is. I spend a lot of time there mentally. But with politics, marketing is all about being able to hook and jive based on what's happening currently in culture and connect with people based on the product you're selling, right? And that changes in a world of AI. That changed back when the printing press came around, right? There's always these different inflection points, but the goal of marketing is to pivot based off the current reality. And it's very pragmatic. And I think politics is very similar, where, hey, look, my constituents are distrustful of government. I'm going to start talking about how distrustful I am of government, right? Or I'm going to start saying, man, I might be 65 years old, but look at all these 80-year-old people in government. We need to get them out of here. You need to vote for me because I'll drain this. You have all this different stuff. And so my thing is always, and part of it is growing up a little bit jaded because my generation didn't have heroes. I always ask people of my generation, even Gen X occasionally, but who were your heroes? Oftentimes when I ask someone of your generation, who were your heroes? Sometimes it's like a Mickey Mantle or there's someone out there who you really put on a pedestal and he means a lot or she means a lot to you as an individual based on how they live their life, their accomplishments, all this good stuff, the memories you attach to watching them play ball or whatever the thing is. For us, my generation watched all of our heroes fall in disgrace, right? Anyone that could have happened because there was too much information. The internet ruined so much for PR. So you've got Kris Jenner or not Kris Jenner,
Bruce Jenner.
Bruce Jenner turning into Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah, but that
You've
was
got, not that he was a hero of mine, but that's an example.
He was at a, let me say
he was
this.
at a time, though.
He would have been at a point in time, and then he became a hero for some other people
Exactly.
later, but ceased to be a hero for some.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not even making a.
No, that's just a good. But that
exactly.
Let me say this. That's an extreme example.
It's an extreme example
of somebody falling from. When I say falling from grace, ceasing to be a hero because of who in his case who he was.
Yes.
And then literally changing.
And so
whether
you
all
like
of,
it or
all
not,
of, all
it
of
is
what
the
made
case.
him a hero to begin with changed. Yeah.
And then you've got Bill Cosby, and you've got O.J. Simpson. And
those are great. Those are great examples of people who were, I mean, at the top of people who admired them.
And then you've got, I mean, let's go. I mean, we can keep on going. I mean, Michael Jackson, irrespective, and there's a whole contingency of people who don't believe in any of the child abuse components. I'm not even going to get into that. But the reality is that even if you don't believe that and it didn't happen, it still tarnishes his legacy.
Yes, it does.
Right? And there's so many examples, even Bill O'Reilly with the sexual misconduct stuff. The internet opens us up to really get to see our heroes, peel back the layers of who they are, and then see their true humanity. And the most human characteristic is inconsistency and deceit.
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, and I grew up with the internet.
I don't know. I'm going to push back just a little bit to say the most common one. It's certainly true with those who have fallen, but to say that the most common attributes of human nature are inconsistency and deceit.
I didn't say it was the most common. I said it's the most human.
Well, I don't. I will certainly agree that there are very few, if more than one, Mother Teresa's. I will agree with that as a human. I'm setting aside Jesus because those who believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that he represents a different type, he's a unique human,
yes.
a unique,
exactly.
in the truest sense of that word. Mother Teresa's, her image never, we're talking about
Christopher
Hitchens, but Mother Teresa's image up until all through her life and all the way until her death was always one of an amazing,
beyond reproach.
Yes, good term. And there are not many heroes in the news media. The closest to that in my generation would have been Walter Cronkite.
Yes. We've discussed him before.
Yeah, Walter Cronkite he was voted, I mean, year in, year out, the most trusted person in America. And then in show business, there are certain people, and usually it's old generations back, where you have people like Jimmy Stewart.
Yes.
You have certain actors whose lives were, they lived there. They were famous. They were movie stars. They played great roles, but their personal lives were without a bunch of drama.
Yes.
And there are some movie stars today who are big time movie stars whose personal lives are without drama. Denzel Washington.
That's
to
true.
me is a.
That's true. He's a good example.
I love his movies. For people who have not listened to his commencement addresses,
yes,
I would encourage people to search and find Denzel Washington's. Because he's made a number of them. They all are very in similar themes, but they're truly wonderful. And that's he's a very, very well grounded person. And there are other actors like that, but because their private lives are uneventful.
Yes.
From the standpoint of scandal, we don't think about it that way. It's only the ones who do have scandal.
100%.
Yeah. In fact, I'm not even sure that I can't remember the last number of years. I mean, you have where movie stars show up at events and galas and they stand there in front of things and all these photographs are being taken. I can't remember the last time I remember seeing Denzel Washington
Yeah, it seems like
having his picture
he's kind
taken.
of outside.
I don't
of
think
that.
he cares.
Yeah, which is refreshing.
Yeah, it is.
You know,
It
I guess
is.
his peak was a while back. I need to see like the timeline of his movies, but I remember he's kind of like in the Tom Hanks category of just
Yes.
you know.
Tom Hanks would actually be another one. He's had some personal issues with his family, but not his. They're they're more sad. They're sad. You go, oh, that's sad. Not his personal life.
Well, even you think back, and that's a little bit of a pivot, but even with like JFK as an example, the energy that the press took was, we're not going to talk about Marilyn Monroe.
Right.
You know, which is a huge difference than today, where we're going to create Marilyn Monroe. You know, if we need someone to lose their primary, then I don't care how flimsy the evidence is. We will create a Marilyn Monroe and we will scream it from the rooftops, and we will create bots online to yell about it. And this is both sides of the aisle. I'm not going to get into the percentages of who's doing what, but the reality is that, and I, harken back to a little bit of my military experience. I don't care where the advantage is. I'm going to take it if the goal is to achieve something, right?
Well,
and that's when it gets dangerous.
And this is where you get into, so for example, if you ask me, do I distrust the media?
It depends.
The answer is, well, if you're asking me, do I distrust CNN? My answer would be yes. And so if that's what I'm thinking when I answer that question, and the media has gotten to be where it does cheer for one side or the other. And so, for example, most recently when Biden was president, you had Tom Scarborough on I think it was MSNBC was what it was called then. He said that he met with Biden the other day, and he has never been mentally sharper. I mean, and he said that, and if he believed it,
that's laughable.
Then he's a fool. Well, then if he believed it, then he's a fool. If he said it and didn't believe it, then you can come up with a
Either way, I don't want to listen to him.
Well, exactly. Yeah, but the people who do, who they want to believe that. Mike Hassel, I made the comment. People believe what they want to believe, and he refined it, saying, "Well, people believe what they want to believe to be true."
Yes, very true.
And so you can now find media that will tell you whatever you want.
Yes.
If that's what you want to believe, you can actually find media who will tell you that.
Yes, 100%.
And that's an interesting, because in the old days, you had ABC, NBC, and CBS, and they are the ones who determine what the news would be. They're determining what the public would know.
Yes,
and they covered up a lot. JFK is an example. They covered up because he was
and they're still covering up a lot.
Yes. Oh yeah. Well, but I'm saying that I'm talking about at the time.
Yes, exactly. But I mean, even we are now still covering up a lot about JFK. Even in 2026, there are still things the United States public isn't allowed to know about that, which I feel like as an American you should be pissed off about. As an American, you should be it should be normal to feel a frustration around not being able to see everything in the files for 9/11, everything in the files for JFK, everything in the files for the Bay of Pigs. I mean, it's ridiculous that we're not allowed to see this.
Okay, so you're on a very interesting topic here, and that you're picking particular things, okay, which is fine. But generally speaking, government tries to protect, and the institutions, the news institutions, they seem to be in league with each other to try to protect certain things. 100%. And when I say certain things, it's most things.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
So those certain things are most things. So, for example, you have people in Congress screaming and yelling. In fact, I think you were fairly strong on this particular thing, and that is release all of the Epstein files. Okay, because if there are people in politics who were doing terrible things with Jeffrey Epstein, we have a right to know. Okay? Now, there's a slush fund in Congress that pays off mostly women who claim that a member of Congress sexually harassed them or worse, and this slush fund pays them off, and that is secret. Okay? Over 350...
Not very secret.
No, it's still very secret.
Well, I know, but what you're talking about is the point.
I'm only talking about that it exists, but I don't know who's paid off and on whose behalf.
That's fair.
So what I'm saying is that so there are many members of Congress who yelled that they wanted the Epstein files released, who themselves were using slush fund money.
Because they're good politicians. They're saying what people want to hear so they can get reelected. At the end of the day, you follow people's actions. And I think it all should be out in the open. I don't think it would be good if we never found out about Bill O'Reilly's components, the things that he was doing that were unsavory. I would want to know about that, especially when someone's telling me how I should think about life in a moral sense.
Now, I'm not defending Bill O'Reilly, but in the case of Bill O'Reilly, my understanding is Fox or Bill O'Reilly settled lawsuits with women who accused him of things, and for those accusations, Fox fired him. Now, what we don't know is what the nature, because they're under NDAs.
Yeah, of course.
And by the way, he's not a politician.
That's true.
So to me, his privacy, once you sign NDAs, because he's not a politician, there's a greater argument that if people sign an NDA, then he's a private citizen. He has a right to some level of privacy, up to some point.
Yes.
Up to some point. If I had to guess, I would guess that he made comments that people found to be insulting or disparaging or hostile, and it would be that type of thing.
Yes, which is very different than groping someone or something like that. And again, I don't know anything about it. I just know it's 36 million.
You and I are theorizing here.
It's true.
But in politics, if taxpayer money is being used to pay somebody off, to me, the idea that is not public is breathtaking.
Agreed. 100% agree. I think the Epstein files represent an exceptional red herring, right? But I don't think that, it's like the argument where people say, anybody but Trump. And you're like, well, no, not anybody but Trump. That's a ridiculous statement. Let's walk it back. Like, you wouldn't want Pol Pot being in charge of the United States. You wouldn't want Goebbels being in charge of the United States. Like, where's the line? Like, because some people on the right, they're looking at the left and saying, hey, you don't get much worse than Biden because at least you know Trump's thinking, right? You know that he's awake, you know he's aware. And the perception from the right looking at Biden is that this guy's virtually a vegetable. And someone else is the puppet strings, got the puppet strings right here. And from my side, looking at the Epstein side, what I hear oftentimes is they're like, well, you're sucked into the Epstein files. Think about all this other corruption. What about that? And I'm like, yeah, that too. And so it's not a either or. I'm not saying that you're saying that. I'm just saying I've had conversations with people where it becomes, well, wouldn't you rather, like, most people who are doing these horrendous acts to children are people who are in your own family, who are quietly doing these things. Like the vast majority of cases where a child is assaulted is from a member of the family, like an uncle or this, that, and the other. And they bring all this stuff up. And I'm like, I can hate that too. I can hate that too.
Yeah.
My thing is that there's only a window of time where so many people are mad about the Epstein files, and it represents an opportunity to have a conversation about the congressional component. I don't think we'd be having the conversation about the slush fund without the Epstein files, which is great to me. That being said, who knows the Epstein files are not files in a sense. There's not boxes of manila envelopes.
Well, there are boxes of documents, emails and texts.
But it's not cut and dry is my thing. I think a lot of people thought that the Epstein files was a black book with names, with what the people did, all scribbled down. It's like real black and white. And the reality is, there's how many? 80,000 different documents do you have to parse through to find something?
I think a lot more than 80,000.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know even how much.
Because if an email or a text is considered an individual document, it was millions.
Fair, yeah. Well, then there you go.
It was millions.
You got so much to parse through.
Yeah.
And I think that, in the wake of Charlie Kirk, in the wake of Kash Patel's, I'm not going to say, Kash Patel has had a difficult time in the press. Right, and he's had some.
But here's an interesting question. I will agree that the press on Kash Patel has been negative.
Yes,
I certainly will agree with that. But I also think there are people in the press who are not very honest about Kash Patel, and are certainly not balanced.
Oh,
who are out to try to get him.
Well, I feel like when the press
so he has sued the Atlantic magazine.
Yes.
he has now sued them, and which gets into I'd like to pursue this thread here just for a bit because there was a court case called Sullivan. I don't even know who Sullivan was, but Sullivan, I believe, sued the New York Times. So I may get this wrong, but I think Sullivan sued the New York Times, and Sullivan was considered to be at the time a public person, a public figure.
L.B. Sullivan, the Montgomery, Alabama police commissioner, sued the New York Times in 1960 over a full-page civil rights advertisement titled "Heed Their Rising Voices." He claimed the ad contained minor factual inaccuracies that defamed him and the police department, even though he was never explicitly named.
Okay, so the Sullivan case is a Supreme Court case that essentially said if you are a public figure, that being able to prove defamation against another party, the bar was much higher. And I don't know whether public figure means that you're famous or whether you're a politician.
That's a fuzzy definition.
So I don't know. And I'm
I wonder
sure
what the threshold is.
I think there is a difference in the law between those two, but
that's actually a good question. I'm going to ask from the perspective of the law. What is from the perspective of the law? What constitutes a public figure? In U.S. law, a public figure is an individual who has achieved widespread fame or voluntarily thrust themselves into the forefront of public controversies. That is not specific enough.
Okay, well, so what we're trying to get at here is that they're famous.
Yeah.
And you can be famous, and what I'm trying to do is trying to break it down into two categories of fame. And one is fame in the private sector, and one is fame in the public sector. And my understanding is that if you are famous in the public sector, your ability to sue for defamation because of the Sullivan case is much higher. And so what this case, there are two cases.
When you say the ability to sue is much higher, do you mean it's more likely that you will win, or are you saying the other way direction?
More difficult for you to win.
Okay, cool.
Because there are two cases that are going on right now. One is actually before the Supreme Court right now, and that's Alan Dershowitz. Now, Alan Dershowitz has never been a politician, but Alan Dershowitz is a very famous lawyer. Alan Dershowitz defended Trump, and I don't remember whether or not this case is about his defending Trump in impeachment or defending Trump in something else. But in any event, CNN, according to Dershowitz, made some statements that Dershowitz says CNN knew were false because they quoted him as saying certain things that he didn't say. Okay?
Yeah, that's a huge line.
And they're claiming, well, he's a public figure. That case is now being heard before the Supreme Court to determine whether, because Sullivan is not written into the Constitution itself. So Sullivan is a court case that the Supreme Court said if you're a famous person, a public figure, then you can't sue for defamation on the same standards that a non-public figure could. The bar is higher to win. Well, if Dershowitz wins, because he's not settling, he wants the Supreme Court to rule on his case. And if it turns out that if you simply lie about a public figure, okay, if you lie publicly about somebody who's not a public figure, but you do so publicly, you are defaming that person, and that person can successfully sue you, or probably can successfully sue you, depending on how damaging what the statement was. So now what we're going to find out is whether or not the Supreme Court is going to lower the bar. And Cash Patel's fits into that same category because I think it's the Atlantic Magazine wrote a column claiming that sources inside the FBI claim that Cash Patel is regularly inebriated on the job. okay? And they claim they have sources for that, and he is claiming, well, no, the quotes is sources. I mean, that's what they are claiming.
But to say sources, I remember they said they were going to, these are named sources. I'm like, name them.
Well, no, they don't say name sources.
Well, they did in the deposition or whatnot. It wasn't a deposition. It was in the hearing where one of the senators, the annoying senator the one who shouldn't be able to run in California, what's his name? The one who's got some sexual misconduct stuff floating around right now. Yes, Swalwell.
He's a House member.
House member. There we go. He brought it up in a hearing where he's talking directly to, I believe it was either Hegseth or Patel. And it was Patel. But he was saying, these are named sources. We can name them. And it's like, well, then name them. Don't say it's a named source.
Okay.
Unless you can name them.
Yeah,
so it's like,
right.
Where's the line between politics, marketing, whatever you want to call it, and then, yes, Sarah Jelani is saying this one thing.
Well, so what we're having here, and this is an interesting discussion that gets into the trust area.
Yeah.
And that is that if the media is allowed to make false statements about public figures and not be held accountable, and that gets them more viewership and therefore more revenue,
which it would,
then they are more likely to expand on that strategy to make more money.
Yeah.
George Stephanopoulos and ABC were sued by Trump because George Stephanopoulos said on the same broadcast on more than one occasion that Trump had been found guilty of rape.
Yeah.
And that was a false statement. And he didn't say it just once. He said it either 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And Trump sued. Now they settled. And so it was never resolved whether or not what Stephanopoulos said, because Trump was president at the time, whether or not as a public figure, Stephanopoulos could say something that was false. I mean, just absolutely.
Do you think he shouldn't have settled? Do you think he should have pushed all the way through?
Well, I'm not the plaintiff. I'm not the defendant. I don't know how much time I'm willing to spend on it. I'm certain that ABC wanted to settle because they didn't want to go into depositions.
Exactly.
That's what you want to try to avoid is the depositions when you're dealing in this level.
Yes.
And so Trump has sued a number of people, a number of organizations and people who have settled rather than to go through the process.
That's right.
And so, but in the case of Dershowitz is actually wanting his case. He wants his case to change Sullivan. He wants this Supreme Court to rule in a way that will force media organizations to be more careful about outlandish assertions about public figures, whether they're public or politicians. And Kash Patel's case, in some case, his is at the first, at the federal court level, district court level. I think it's a federal, not a state court. But his case, a lot is riding on his case on the outcome of the Supreme Court case with Dershowitz.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Because CNN would not be able to hide behind unnamed sources.
Exactly.
If they're making a claim that is in fact defamatory.
Yes.
And this gets into the reason we're getting down a rat hole here, but this gets into the question you brought up at the beginning about your generation's lack of trust in institutions.
That's right.
Now, my generation, I'm going to speak for. I'm not going to speak for my generation per se, but I'm going to speak for me. I have spent enough time building a foundation of knowledge so that if somebody says something that does not sound accurate to me, my first reaction is not to necessarily not to believe them, but it is not to believe them. And I'll say that sounds wrong to me. So before I'm going to continue forward on it, I need more information so that I understand whether or not that is in fact true, or whether or not it is true depending on the context, which can mean all kinds of things depending on the context. So anyway, I don't know if have we covered this particular topic? Because you said you had 4 or 5 you wanted to talk about.
Well, I do have a lot that we can pull from.
Sure.
But as far as a few, I just want to read the headlines on these. And again, I've got citations.
Let me ask you a question on this, because I asked my grandchildren who are in their 20s, early 20s. Mm-hmm. I said, "How do you get your news?" They say, "Well, we have a news feed." Mm-hmm. So they have their news fed to them.
That's right.
Okay, so what they are reading as news is information that somebody else is giving to them, mm-hmm. or an algorithm is giving to them because they think that's what they want to know. Mm-hmm. I don't have that at all. Mm-hmm. I have about 15 websites that I go to read stories. Mm-hmm. Some of them conflict with the other stories, which is why then I have to go dig to try to figure out what's the truth. Mm-hmm. But I don't have news stories fed to me. I go to places and then I look at it, and if it's a particularly provocative story, I go, "Ooh, I didn't know that." Mm-hmm. I go check that
exactly
to make sure that that's not just not a wild hair in a story or something. Mm-hmm. But so at any rate, how do you get? So I get my news by going to about 15 different sites.
Yes.
And it takes me a while to do that, but mm-hmm. I enjoy doing it. So
exactly,
it's a good way for me to spend part of my day. Mm-hmm. How do you get your news?
I will take a subject that I'm specifically interested in, such as I'll use this example. I've been doing this for probably, I guess, about 2 years now, since AI became a thing. And to start from the beginning, to defend my position here a little bit, is that AI is really good at a few different things, but it's also really bad at a few other things. The things it's really good at is accessing information very quickly and then being able to express the information from multiple viewpoints, right? It's not creating those viewpoints, but there's enough information online and on YouTube and all this stuff to be able to know, based on political affiliation, what your kind of frame of a story would be. Because you could take one story that in Town Hall Media or Red State is being hailed as like really positive about Trump, take the exact story and have it written from a CNN or MS Now, Miss Now mm-hmm. Perspective, and have it be super negative, even though the facts are all the same in both stories, right? Anything can be positioned or framed. Mm-hmm. And so knowing that is the way the world is, but also not only the way it is, the incentive structures aligned across social media as well as legacy media, wherever you get your information, the incentive structures are always going to be the same. It's always going to be, how can I position this in a way that makes my customer, the people reading from Town Hall Media or Red State or MS Now or whatever, make them want to come back because mm-hmm. I'm making them feel good about I'm supporting what they believe to be true and want to believe to be true. I'm supporting that. So from my side is what I'll do is and now I'm using Claude more than anything else. I was using ChatGPT, but I'll take a subject that I'm interested in, such as distrust of government and where that came from and what the evidence is to be distrustful of government. So it starts with one question: should I trust government? And then that branches out into about 15 different auxiliary questions. And so because I like using AI to brainstorm, I will ask AI, hey, I have this feeling and this thought around distrust in government. I want you to pull citations from verified sources on the web with the citation, the link to the source, all this good stuff, and then break down both sides of what, both ends of the political spectrum, and then what kind of the middle is on any of these different stories. And then give me the facts, break it down into bullet points, and make it very digestible, and obviously give me the link so I can go and check things out. What I like to do with that is, one, it allows me to get a lot of different viewpoints all in one space on one kind of overarching subject, and then I will drill down based on that. And another place I get my news is from you. Okay. You send me articles, and I read all of those. Not the whole thing all the time, but I read all of those.
Now let me ask you a question. If you were to ask AI this question, because I use AI to look up very specific facts.
Yes.
Okay, I will do that, but I don't ask them. I don't ask them questions like this. Does government solve problems better than the private sector?
And why don't you? Because you already know the answer?
I already know the answer. But I would be interested in what AI, and I know, and we talk about this on the island.
Yes.
I can state factually that government is inherently wasteful, and then I can explain why that statement is true, and then I can say that the private sector is inherently efficient. Now, the word inherent doesn't mean always. It means tends to be.
Yes.
Okay, that's what inherent means.
Default setting.
So government tends to be inefficient.
It's an exception to the rule when it's efficient.
Yes, the private sector tends to be efficient, and I can explain why the private sector tends to be efficient. And so if somebody tries to argue that government solves problems better than the private sector, then that's an interesting conversation. But they are not able to back it up with facts unless they want to use an exception.
Yes.
But that's why I say it's more likely or less likely. That's the word. That's what inherent means.
Yes.
A lot of people from an argumentative standpoint, they will use an exception to try to prove the rule.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
I know a lady who's much stronger than most of the men I know.
There you go.
Know,
Therefore, women and men are of equal strength.
Exactly.
That type of thing.
Exactly. And, I don't trust. The thing is that I think a lot of people made the mistake of, one, people inherently are always looking for shortcuts. So as soon as ChatGPT came out in the scene and all these different AI platforms, they started allowing these platforms to think for them. This is happening across the board in schools, whether it's here, Canada, UK, whatever, wherever you are, anywhere people have access to ChatGPT, they're going to use it to cut corners. I don't use ChatGPT to think for me. Or Claude or any of these. I don't use them to think for me. But what they are exceptionally good at is accessing from information that already exists.
Yes.
And so
factual information.
Exactly. And also, information that isn't factual oftentimes. And if you go to a publication, it pulls a publication that is not trustworthy and only is being cited because it happens to talk about the thing that I asked it about. Then it's up to me to decide based on my experience and what I'm seeing elsewhere, whether or not that's something to be trusted, right? Or whether or not it's out of context. And you can dig in. The more you dig in, the more you realize how much you don't know. And that's how everything works, Dunning-Kruger. But from my standpoint, your output is only as good as your input. And so if I asked AI, which I just did, whether or not government is more efficient than private sector, I'll read this out.
Okay.
And then I'm not going to do the next exercise, but I will express the piece here, which is if I were to ask it that, and then I said, tell me from a classically liberal standpoint.
Okay.
It will do so. Then I say, tell me from a MAGA conservative.
I'm curious, what is the answer to that?
So my exact phrasing was, does government solve problems better than the private sector? And it gave me not too long of an answer, so I'll just read it out. Short answer, neither side wins across the board. They're good at different things, and most real-world success stories are hybrids. And then it gives me two sections bulleted out. One is where government tends to outperform, and then the other one is where the private sector tends to outperform. So I'll go with government first. Where government tends to outperform. Problems with no profit motive. Basic research, public health surveillance, clean air/water. The next bullet, natural monopolies, where competition is wasteful, sewers, highways, military. Coordination at scale, where you need everyone in, vaccines, GPS, the internet's foundational R&D, setting rules of the game, so property rights, contract enforcement. Without this, markets don't function. And then the next set of bullets is where the private sector tends to outperform. Anything requiring rapid iteration and feedback from customers, so customer tech, retail, food, allocating resources across millions of competing uses, no central planner has ever beaten a price signal at this. Then cost discipline. When you can go bankrupt, you cut waste. Government rarely face Governments rarely face that pressure. That was what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And then the last one is innovation and execution and delivery once a technology exists. So now it's giving me the honest take. The honest take, the government versus private framing is mostly a tribal signal, not a useful analytical tool. The real question is always, what's the failure mode here? Markets fail when there are externalities, information asymmetries, or monopoly power. Governments fail when there's no competition, no profit and loss feedback, and capture by special interests is easy. Pick the tool that matches the failure mode. A test I'd push back on you with, name a problem you think government should solve, and ask whether the specific government you have, not an idealized one, actually has the capacity, incentives, and accountability to do it. Most arguments fall apart at that step. Same goes for the market will handle it. When the market in question is 3 consolidated players with lobbyists. Bottom line, stop asking which sector is better, ask which failure mode you're dealing with, then pick the tool that's least bad at that specific job.
Well, that's an interesting answer.
Yeah.
It kind of runs around in a bunch of different places, but it's interesting to me from if you whether or not that answer is being taught, if the subject is even being brought up.
Yeah.
If you ask that question in a college to a college professor, it would be interesting to know what their answer is. It also is a little bit difficult to take that and apply it because it's at a very high level and very general, and maybe it needs to be.
Yeah. I do think that the question to ask yourself is this a job for government to solve? Is a really pragmatic question.
Yes, it is.
Because if someone says there is a moral decay in the U.S. that needs to be fixed, and this is a huge priority, I do not think that it is the government's job to fix a moral decay issue in the U.S., as an example, right? If you're on the Christian side, you're going to think, okay, I think the churches in America need to be a little bit more concerted and put a little bit more effort.
Now I'm gonna let me ask you some questions here because when you put it that way without a specific issue, and because you say government shouldn't be doing this. So, for example, should government regulate at least the age at which people can consume alcohol?
Yes.
Okay, so they should regulate that to some extent.
Yes, because people will sell alcohol to 5-year-olds if they get the chance, because everyone wants money.
Sure, okay.
You know? And so, or not everybody, but most people want money at almost any cost.
Enough people would want to make the profit off of 5-year-olds.
That's right.
So that you stop it.
Exactly.
Because
let's call it 16. 5-year-olds is kind of ridiculous, but 16-year-olds. If you can make a super attractive to 16-year-old drink and sell it as close as you're legally allowed to a school, and set up your marketing on Instagram to be, people would do it.
Okay, so let me ask: do you put drugs and alcohol in a general category of moral issues?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. So you don't. All right.
No.
All right. So setting an age limit to drive is a safety issue.
Yes.
Okay. Setting age limits on alcohol or drugs,
safety issue,
or not at all, is a safety issue, a health issue.
Yes.
Okay. Not a moral issue. Abortion. Do you think abortion is a moral issue?
Yes.
Because when you made the comment, our society's going to hell, or morality, blah blah blah. So I'm trying to pick particular issues that would be moral that you would describe as moral in nature.
Yes.
So would abortion be a moral? Would it be
moral, but not only moral? I think that it is 100% a moral issue.
Okay.
But even if you take morality out of the question, it is still something that's worth debating, right? So the point I'm making is that if someone came to me and said, well, the only reason you are anti-abortion and pro-life is because you're a Christian or you're a Muslim or you're a Mormon or Scientologist, whatever the affiliation is, then I would say, no, it can still be argued from an atheist point of view. It can be argued from an agnostic point of view. It can be argued from many different point of views because of the lack of pragmatism and the negative incentive structure that it allows a country that is where abortion is not only accepted but encouraged. There are negative side effects to that, or I would just call them effects.
Well, but these are the debate points over the question. My question is, should government have should there be laws in regard to the question of abortion?
Yes.
Okay. At what level?
When you say level, do you mean level in government or
Yes,
level of abortion?
Level in government.
Well, I would think it would be state.
Well, it is now, but we went for 50 or 60 years where the Supreme Court ruled that this is what the law will be for the entire nation.
Yes.
So
I think state. That's what my personal opinion is.
Okay. Now, do you think that doing it at the state level is on balance better for our country to have the question determined at the state level, not at the national level?
I think it's one of these things one of these laws that has to be proven through natural selection. If we don't have another state, if you have 90% of people in Oregon, let's just say, in favor of abortion, and they think it's good, and then I think
they think it's okay.
They think it's okay. Yeah, exactly. They think it is an acceptable course of action. Then I believe that they should be able to vote on that specific thing, no matter how much I disagree with it. Okay. I just won't live there. I will not.
Okay, that's fine. But we're not. I'm not trying to personalize these things.
Yeah.
But do you think that moral issues in general should be addressed at the state level rather than the national level, or not at all?
I would say it depends on the issue, and it also depends on the weight of pragmatic versus moral, right?
Okay.
So there are certain moral issues from a traditionally Christian standpoint or a traditional Mormon standpoint, whatever it is. There are certain moral issues that don't have very much pragmatic effect, right? There are some that have way more pragmatic effect.
What moral issues don't have much in the way of pragmatic effect?
Like someone might find it to be immoral for me to go downstairs, walk out into the street, and start cursing at an old woman. They might find that immoral, but should it be illegal? No. I don't think it should be illegal to stand in front of somebody and call them names, right?
All right. Now, that's an interesting. Let me say this. I don't want to get off in the weeds here, but that is a very interesting question as to whether or not someone has a right to live peacefully. And if I'm just walking down the street, and just because I'm going out to exercise and I'm walking down the street, and three people come up and start screaming in my face. I don't believe that. I believe that is disturbing the peace.
Yes,
and I don't believe they have a right to do that. I don't think they have a right to do that.
I would agree with that. But as far as
you just said I could go out and scream at an old lady who's walking down the street.
Yeah, but if you have three people impeding, let's just say your ability to walk or something like that.
Not impeding.
I'm saying that if I go downstairs
this is not impeding
and there's someone standing, from me to in that office right there, and I start calling them curse words, and I am not running at them with a fist up or anything like that, that is illegal. To threaten violence is illegal. But if I say, I hate you, you're a piece of garbage, like I say whatever I want, that is not illegal. That's protected under free speech. And I don't think it would be good if the government started deciding. There has to be a line there. I agree, but that is a great example of something that is immoral in most people's religions.
Right, now, in our system of government, I will say that there has been a reinterpretation of the First Amendment that allows people to protest loudly, and claim they have the right to do it under the Constitution, and they don't have a right to do it under the Constitution as the Constitution itself is written. because what it says is that you're allowed to peaceably assemble and petition the government. And the word peaceably means something. It doesn't say just assemble.
Yeah.
It says peacefully assemble. And so what the Constitution allows is for a large group of people to peacefully petition the government and to come together to do so. I would make the argument that for example, and we had it here recently in the General Assembly of our government, we had the Republicans there voted in a new map for a redistricted Tennessee, so that the Memphis itself will not be a mostly black district, but Memphis itself will be represented by 3 different congressional districts. And there was a particular member of the House named Justin Pearson, who's a black person, who wants to run for the House of Representatives and would have had a very good chance of winning had the district not been changed. And he was so angry that as he's walking past a policeman, he gets right in his face and calls him a bunch of very derogatory things and screams at him. Now, he didn't get arrested for that. But my question to you is, let's say that policeman hadn't been a policeman, but had just been a person who was standing there. And this member of the House is walking by them and looks at them. And let's say this person happened to be a white man, and this particular House member, Justin Pearson, is a black man. And he turns and yells right in his face from 3 or 4 inches away and screams at him. Does he have a legal right to do that? And I would argue, actually, he doesn't. And that our
society,
society,
that's a proximity thing. I think that the distance matters. I think that if you're 3 inches from someone's face and they're screaming at you, you don't know if you're right around the corner of having a violent interaction.
I'm not.
I know, but that is from a law standpoint. That's what the law cares about.
No, it doesn't.
It's a threat of violence. That's the exact thing.
It says peaceably assemble. The question is, what does the word peaceably mean?
But you're saying whether or not it should be illegal to yell at someone,
right? Yeah, and so if it's not 6 inches, is it a foot? Is it 2 feet? And what I'm saying
if it's 10 feet, that's a different thing than 3 inches.
I agree that it's a difference in distance, but I don't know.
It's a difference in threat.
Now, wait. You're trying to say that a person has the right to say whatever they want to, even if they are disrupting the peace. And I'm saying that I think that when you say our society is degrading, I think part of do you believe let me change it. Do you believe our society is degrading?
There's so many ways to answer that, but I think that it's kind of incontrovertible that is kind of the direction. Okay. I mean, you could dig in. Let's just say for the argument, yes. Let's just say that to be easy about it.
All right. So the question is then why? I read an article. I'm going to digress just a tad. But I read an interesting article. I've never worked in a large company. Okay. And but I read an article where if you are a male working in a large company in New York, there are many men who will not get on an elevator if there is a lone female on the elevator.
Because they're dangerous.
Why?
I'm just kidding.
Why?
I would guess, I haven't read this article, but I would guess that they are adverse to potentially being targeted.
Being accused of something that they cannot defend.
Exactly.
Okay. So. Now, and then there are also women who won't get on an elevator with a single man.
Exactly.
Because they might feel like they might be abused in some way or another.
That's true.
Okay, and they don't want that. So
that's fair.
So I kind of understand that.
Yeah.
But if you got on an elevator with other people, do you have the right to scream at the other people because you have a point of view? Do you have the right to do that? You're not raising your hands, and you say, I'm not going to be violent, and then you start screaming at them. Do you have the right to do that?
I think it's always, and it depends, but I think that the easiest thing to kind of bring this back to is, to transpose this conversation over onto the how Trump communicates is interesting to me, because I believe in a certain set of decorum from people who are in leadership. Okay. I believe that it is important and a part of your job as a leader to communicate in a way.
We're not talking about how people ought to act. We're talking about whether they have a right to act.
Agreed, but the way people act is predicated on, or not the way people act is predicated on, how people ought to act is predicated on how people act, right? And I think there's a difference definition between a leader of a country or a constituency in Congress. That person is held to a different standard than a random person who's mad at you on an elevator. But my main key...
No.
It is.
No, but I understand there is, but I'm trying to focus on the random person on the elevator.
Agreed.
Agreed. So let's not conflate it.
But we're not just focusing on that. We're talking about the moral degradation of society, which...
So let's separate.
Leadership is top down. So the person in the elevator, it always depends, just like every other court case, it always depends on the perceived threat of violence. If someone is yelling at me from across the street, there is a different perceived threat of violence than if they're standing right in front of me, right? And so for me, I don't let people get within arm's distance, right?
We're two ships passing because what CNN wrote about Alan Dershowitz had nothing to do with, he never felt that he was physically at risk. He never felt he was physically at risk.
Yes.
In fact, they didn't even scream it. They wrote it. But they wrote something that he says is false. So the question is, do they have the right to do that? So I'm now moving it to...
you're moving the goalpost.
No. So now I'm going to move it back. I'm now going to move it back to the elevator. And I don't want to bring in a politician. I'm just asking the question. For whatever reason that you think that person might be screaming at other people on the elevator, if they are screaming at the first of all, we do know this. If they're doing that and they're an employee of the company can fire them.
Yeah.
Okay. And they have they can try to sue and say, I have the right to do that, but they don't. Okay. They don't have the right because private companies do have the right to make sure that people treat each other civilly based on the law and the company's belief in what is civil. But my question is, does that person, if they do that, if they're not an employee, and the elevator gets down to the first floor, and there's policemen that are standing in the lobby just because there's security, and they're standing in the lobby, can the people who've been, I say they've just been abused. I think they have been abused because somebody had been screaming at the top of their lungs, even though they didn't feel like they're about to get killed or about to even get hurt.
Yeah,
they've just been abused. Can I take an air horn and blow it at somebody where it might, but I'm not sure, might hurt their ears? What's the difference between that and screaming as loud as I possibly can?
Well, I will say that the conversation started with not screaming as loud as we can. The conversation started with coming downstairs, seeing an old lady across the street, and yelling it to the degree at which they could hear it. So I was never discussing screaming something at the top of your lungs right in someone's face. But if we are talking about that, I will say that does cross the line into disturbing the peace, and it also crosses the line into there's a higher likelihood that this will escalate to violence.
Okay,
and that's where the law starts.
Okay, what I'm saying is that if we agree that there is a level at which disturbing the peace is something that people should be held to account.
Yes.
Then that to me is we have found common ground on that.
Yes.
Because I don't whether or not I have to prove that I thought it was going to escalate to violence. That now raises a different standard because this gets into if somebody's giving a public speech, and it's announced and people are showing up in the auditorium because they want to hear this person speak, and there are people who don't want that person to be heard, and so they show up to scream and yell,
That's
and they call it a peaceful protest because they say we're not going to be violent. We're just going to scream until that person who's speaking leaves.
Well, that's not the way it is. That's not peaceful.
So, okay.
It's just whether or not someone should be put in a cage for yelling something or shouting something or whispering something. And I don't think people should, or else Trump would spend a lot of time.
So should people who then show up and try to keep people from speaking, should they be held to account by being arrested?
It depends on if they have to be arrested for that.
No, I'm saying
if they won't stop trying to go in. If someone shows up to an event and starts yelling out and they say leave, and they leave, someone shouldn't come up and arrest them after they have left after being admonished for yelling something out. See, that's what I'm saying as far as like, it depends. If I go to an event and you say something, you're a crumb, you're up there talking about the island, and I'm like, I don't believe in islands, and I start yelling at you, and then you say, the people in the event are like, get out, you're not here for the right reasons, blah, blah, and then I leave, and then police officers show up at my house the next day and say, you yelled something out at an event, it's time for you to live in a cage now because you've been bad. I don't think that makes sense. I think that's an overstep. Okay. I personally disdain the United States
so what we're
government's
agreeing
power
on
in that
here,
regard.
this is interesting because what you're saying, and this is, by the way, the reason we're raising this question is that this so-called, when I call, and I do say it's so-called right to protest.
Yeah.
There isn't anything in the law that uses the word protest. It says peaceably assemble.
Yes.
And and people, you hear media people who say people have the right to protest. No, they don't.
While they have videos of buildings and cars being burned down.
Yeah.
As if that's not.
But they obviously think that is mostly peaceful. They call it mostly peaceful.
Yeah.
And so I do believe that our society is coming apart, but also it's coming apart because those people who want to treat other people with respect need to be treated with the same level of respect for there to be some level of civility. Now, do I believe that if Hakeem Jeffries gets up to the podium and says some very nasty things about Trump, do I think he should be held to account for that other than politically? The answer is no.
Yeah, of course.
It's not that, of course.
Well, of course, based on me knowing who you are, I would not think that.
Okay, excuse me. All right.
Exactly.
And the same thing. And now, do I? We could have an interesting discussion whether or not I think it's good for society for people to call each other names from a distance and at podiums.
Yeah.
I mean, Trump, for example, the other day, he was sitting at his desk and somebody asked him a question about Hakeem Jeffries, and Trump said, "I think he's just a dumb person." I think that statement, it just indicates that he's a dumb person. He's a Democrat. He's a Democrat. So, and everybody, people kind of stand there kind of chuckling. That's, he says, I don't know if that term will catch on because they're all Democrats.
Yeah.
And so he does that, and people who think that is beneath the presidency, if they believe that, then they're very upset.
Yeah.
If Trump responds to people who have referred to him as a fascist or a Nazi. And so it's an interesting thing to me that how to respond to people who call you the most vile things.
Yes.
And they do it by name.
Well, that's why I really think that, you can't be just like Jesus, but taking some pieces from his book, I don't think there's any evidence that, someone would say something horrific and vile about Jesus and then he would just start calling them names.
No.
And so like that, he might flip over the tables in the synagogue. That might be the case. And that's a big difference. But I think that generally when we think about, hey, if I'm going to go get a job somewhere, let's just say, and let's say that I get the opportunity to interview directly with the CEO and the CEO acts the way he does behind closed doors to me, then I probably will not I will probably not take the job.
Not take
right?
it, yeah.
Exactly. So I understand there's a difference. The way I communicate with my CFO in my organization is going to be a lot more direct and a lot more pragmatic than the way I might communicate with someone who works for me, right? Or, well, not that the CFO doesn't. He does, but better said, someone who might work in a department separated and not needing to know how the sausage is made from a financial standpoint. Let's just say that. I'm going to talk to them and I'm going to say, hey, you're doing a great job. Thanks so much for this. I talk about things with them that matter to them, this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, if I was to, take the mask off, the professional, pragmatic mask off, and be like, man, this quarter is absolute shit. This quarter is that, man, I can't even see where we're going with it. All this good stuff, and I want to have a moment of that. I think that it makes sense to have that behind closed doors. I think that makes sense to have that. But
that's because you're being practical.
Exactly.
In other words, you don't want all of the employees of the company to be aware that you don't know how to fix the problem. I mean, that'd be the best way to say it. Is you're acknowledging there's a problem and you're going, I don't know, this is terrible. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that solving the problem, I think the biggest piece of solving the problem, whatever the problem is accepting your lack of control over certain aspects. And then if I look back at like the past 10 years of operating and trying to do things, there are so many times where I come into a conversation and be like, I don't even know what to do. But by the end of the conversation, I do. And by the end of the week, I've got to fix, or whatever the thing is. It's a constant iteration of, kind of throwing your hands up and having the freedom in closed circles to be able to communicate that way.
Well,
but then understanding that if I'm going to communicate to the larger organization, it is not effective for someone to see the stress that I have, right? And that's like the pragmatic component, but it's also part of leadership, is that if I have a sergeant in my unit who's in charge of me and the rest of people on my team, and I'm underneath them, and I've got to lead a small fire team, and they're in charge of me and the rest of the platoon, and we're about to go into battle, and he's, let's just say, I'm making it reductive, we're about to go on a mission, and him in his brain, he's thinking, there's a good chance we're going to lose 50% of the people in this platoon.
Okay.
It is not pragmatic for him to stand in front of us and bawl his eyes out, right? And so there's always lines, there's always the it depends, but I think it is incredibly important for leaders in organizations, and more importantly than even organizations, leaders of countries who have, because a president has a monopoly on violence. He can kill virtually whoever he wants, right? As long as there's a reason. Right, he can deploy the military.
You're talking about militarily,
exactly, but also in the country. And we're not
No.
Oh, well, then
I'm not going to get into the presidents have the right to kill American citizens.
I'm not just talking about. I was talking about the leaders of countries. We're talking about Saddam Hussein. We're talking about Trump. We're talking about Maduro.
They didn't have the right to do it. They had the ability to do it. You said they had the right. You said they have the right.
The thing is that
they do.
Your right is predicated on your control.
No, you had the ability. That doesn't
Saddam
mean
Hussein would still be in power if it wasn't for the U.S., but that's an external factor.
I think using the term right in the way that we Americans think of that is somehow what you do has a legitimacy to it. But I would also believe most Americans would argue that leaders who kill their own people to maintain their power.
Yeah.
I think we would agree that we think that is not, they don't have a right to do it.
Yes.
They have the ability to do it.
True. But if you're looking at Eritrea as an example, they call it the North Korea of Africa. It's a country that no one really knows about. It's very close to Djibouti, all this good stuff. It's virtually completely closed off. You can't really go there. There's no back and forth. Let's take a country like that, or even North Korea is a better example. People know that more. Relative to North Korea, has a right to kill whoever he wants because he's in charge, right? Doesn't mean that we agree with it, but if they all believe that Kim Jong-un is God, then when he kills someone, it's very different than when the leader of our country kills someone, right? We have a completely different fabric. It's completely changed how, the way we view the world is completely different than someone over there, or China, or even Russia, which is a lot more modernized and, enjoys a lot of aspects of capitalism, this, that, and the other. But in North Korea, in that space, relative to that space, he has a right to kill whoever he wants because that's self-evident. The only reason he wouldn't is if there's an America deciding that Kim Jong-un is enough of a problem for us to go stop him, right? Or you talk about Gaddafi, or you talk about Saddam Hussein, or you talk about any of these different people in those spaces for the time at which they have the power, they have the right. That's the way I mean right. I personally don't think they do. I don't think it's good that they do it. But you're right. They do have the power and the ability to they exercise
I would use the word power as opposed to the word right.
I can accept
that. That's all I'm saying.
That's a good edit. I can agree with that.
And so that's true with thugs in general.
Yeah.
But we've kind of wandered off from the thing about decorum and these types of things, and I think it's going to be interesting. I think on college campuses now.
Yes.
I think that protesting to the point of disrupting the ability or the ability of other students to study, like going in and protesting and screaming and yelling in a library.
Yeah.
I don't think that was allowed. And you could even argue to some extent it was encouraged.
Oh, absolutely.
And
you had professors there in the crowd with these kids doing this oftentimes.
Yeah, and then there were other times when a professor who wasn't popular would be cornered in the hall.
Yep.
And they'd have his back all the way up against the wall, and they'd be screaming in his face. demanding that
that crosses the line,
and demanding that he quit. Well, he didn't feel like necessarily that he was going to be beaten up, but do they have the right? Do they have the right to scream in his face? And if the administrators allow it, then that means that for the administrators, they believe that students have that right.
Exactly.
Now, then it gets into if schools are going to be funded by government, do the people who are providing the funds at taxpayer money, do they have the power, the right, the authority to go into the schools and say, if you continue to allow that to happen on those campuses, we're going to fire you? Okay, or if it's law enforcement, they're going to do something. They're going to do something in addition to seeing that they get fired, or we're going to arrest you. The students who disrupt, they are now getting arrested. Even if the school doesn't think what they're doing is wrong, the authorities are now arresting those people.
Which makes sense.
Which I think you and I think that if a student goes to college and is paying tuition, they have a legitimate right to believe that they can study in peace.
Yes.
Okay.
They're paying for that.
They're paying for the peace.
The library is supposed to be quiet.
And quiet, yeah. So I'm saying this is kind of an interesting thing, and there are other things that touch on this in a tangential way.
Yeah.
So, for example, we're going through now, and I find this from a purely historical and political standpoint, looking at things. I just finished reading a book called Alito, and it's a very easy read in the sense that it doesn't get into a whole bunch of detail in Supreme Court decisions and things like this, but it does quote from some of Alito's rulings, and it also quotes some of his questions when the lawyers are presenting their case before the court. And it's how he tries to, when he's looking at something, how he's trying to narrow the field to the constitutional question, and not the Brennan. William J. Brennan, Supreme Court Justice, he said he believed, and this gets into the idea of the quote living Constitution. But Brennan said that he said justices should interpret the Constitution as if they believed it was written today, which means that's interesting.
That
to
is
me.
An interesting point.
Well, what it means is that the Constitution, if 5 out of 9 justices believe that that's the way that they should interpret the Constitution, then that means the Constitution as it was written is meaningless.
Let me say that again.
If 5 out of 9 agree with the statement that Supreme Court justices should rule on cases, should interpret the Constitution because in the way that they believe the Constitution would be written today, not what it says, but the way they believe it would be written today. What that means is it means that if 5 out of 9 believe it, then the Constitution as it was written means nothing, because they just that is the living Constitution doctrine.
Yeah, it seems a little bit antithetical.
Well, here's the way I look at it. Here's what I would do to a group of students if I was doing constitutional law. I would say, I want each one of you to draft a constitution that will be the laws that this class will operate by.
That's
okay, the way that this, but I want you to make it so that the way you write it is that it includes that your opinion, your personal opinion, always wins. So please draft that, and then that'll be the way the class will operate. Well, what have I just done?
Created a bunch of competing constitutions.
Not just competing constitutions, conflicting constitutions.
Yes, that's true.
No, conflicting constitutions, because I have made it so that each of the 5 students has to draft the language that no matter what anybody else thinks, their opinion is supreme.
Yes.
And if you do that, you can't agree. When the Constitution itself was written, The one thing that all the people in that room, the only thing they agreed on was that the Articles of Confederation, which is what the country was operating under at that time, were insufficient, and if they weren't at least amended, that the country would collapse.
Yes.
So the one thing they agreed to is that what we are doing now cannot stand. Well, when people agree to that, they are forced. This really forces the mind, forces people to talk to each other and to resolve things. Now, in the case of the Constitution, the Constitution left what we know historically. We now know because looking at history, it left one fundamental flaw, and that is it left the institution of slavery in place under the Constitution. It left it in place. And that was the compromise. I'm going to put compromise in quotes here. That was the compromise that was made in order to enact everything else in the Constitution. We also know that was a fatal flaw. Using the word fatal correctly here, because we had a civil war ultimately over that single point. 100%. And so it's just interesting because everything that we do is about human nature. And when somebody says, I had an interesting conversation about I know it, if you're studying medical science, if you're studying this type of science or that type of science, you're trying to find truths and fact. If you're studying political science, what is political science? And it's you're studying political science because you're trying to think about how to organize the affairs of a certain group of people in ways that you want to determine what the goals are before you establish the rules.
Yes.
And then all of your discussion about the rules is to reach a goal. Now, the thing about, and I'm going to compare this, just jump over here to a board game. If six people go buy a board game that all of them have heard is fun, but none of them have ever played it, nor do they know how to play it, what's the first thing they do?
Decide on the rules.
They read the rules.
They read the rules.
Yeah. And then they're going to play the game under the rules, and they know before they start that at the end of the game, one of the six is going to win, which means the other five are going to lose. But they agree to the rules ahead of time, knowing that there will be a winner and that there will be five losers. Now, if they said now one of the rules is that at any point in the game, if five people want to change the rules, they can. Okay.
Yeah.
And the goal was to be the winner. What would happen?
Well, someone wins, and then
no one would ever win. In fact, and
right
no
before
one would
someone
ever
won, the other five would change the rules.
No one would ever win. And in fact, after a time, they would quit playing the game.
That's true. Yeah.
And so,
exactly.
and so when we order a society, we recognize that some people will do better than others under the rules of the society. Some people will.
Yeah.
But we want to make it so that as many people can do well as possible. At least I would. That's the way I think of it. If somebody says, "What should be the goal of government?" and I said, "The goal of government should be for the greatest number of people to live prosperously and civilly as possible. That should be the goal." Well, then what happens to the people who don't succeed and who need help? My response to that is, everybody who has a problem of that nature, and there are people who do need help.
Yeah.
Every one of them lives in a state. Every single one of them lives in a state, and those kinds of problems are best handled by those in government who are closest to the problem. Now, that's generally true. If it's funded by some other place, that's where the conflict. To me, when I look at how government operates, that's where there becomes conflict, because now you're spending other people's money to solve a problem that is local in nature. And so it's interesting as I look at the way government is. I'm trying to remember. I kind of wandered off in this path. What were we talking about right before that?
Well, we were talking about decorum. We went from decorum to I guess consensus.
Well, I think we're talking about the Constitution.
Yes, that's right.
And
if you had a law, if you had a constitutional law class, what you would have.
Yeah,
them do.
and I talked about having, if you had the five students, and so when people are in a business, and this is the difference between business and government. In a business, everybody who works for a company, they all, and this is true in the military too, by the way, you have a common goal. In the case of the military, if you're attacking, you have a common objective, which is generally to subdue an enemy. Now, in business, your goal is to do well in the business, and if it's a competitive place, to do better than your competitors. But that doesn't mean you necessarily will. It means that's what you're. But everybody in the company, they all recognize that their goal is for the company to prosper. In politics, it's not the same.
That's right.
And there is a fundamental difference between. And I'm not, and you know, because you'd brought in the military earlier about your experience in the military and how military leaders have to act in order for them to be effective.
Yes.
And I agree 100% with that definition because the unit itself has a particular goal and has a particular objective. In politics, the Democrat Party and the Republican Party, they may have some common goals, but they have many goals that are at odds with each other. And that's part of what the rub is, but that's also what elections are about, and how we the people get to interact with the people who we give certain amounts of power to. So, well, what else do you have on your list?
Man, I've got a lot, but it really all just kind of floats around.
Well, let's do one more because we're going to have 4 weeks.
Yes.
Where we're doing this. Let's do one more, and then we'll.
Well, on the federal agency abuse side, Operation Choke Point, Obama DOJ pressured banks to drop customers in illegal industries the administration disliked. So gun stores, ammunition retailers, pawn shops, payday lenders, coin dealers, fireworks sellers, tobacco shops. No law was passed, no trial held, just regulatory pressure to debank legal businesses. Trump's DOJ formally ended it in 2017. Why it matters today is the template for modern debanking. Canadian truckers, crypto founders, today's debanking stories all trace back to this playbook, and it was under the Obama administration.
All right, so that's an interesting topic. So first of all, if this gets back to what we were talking about earlier about people playing a game where they have rules ahead of time, and they have to play by the rules till the game's over, or you have 5 people drafting a constitution, and if they're going to end up with a constitution that they all can agree with, they can't each one say that they get to win in the end.
Yes.
Okay. So in this case, what you have is you have in Canada you had one, and then in the U.S. you have businesses that are allowed to operate legally, even though, and I'm just going to make it really clear here, even though the Democrat Party, for example, doesn't like payday lenders, doesn't like gun dealers, doesn't like these different, and they then use their power to debank or cause as much harm to legal businesses that they didn't think should be legal, without going through the process of passing laws or constitutional amendments that make them illegal. And so that did happen. We know that happened. And we know Trump stopped it. Okay, but how do you? What else, if anything, should be done to try to make sure it doesn't happen in the future?
I feel like that's a hard one, because where there's a will, there's a way, and many things happen in secret. And so it's difficult to think about, what law could be passed to keep people who are in charge of laws from doing things that are illegal. Well, it's kind of an interesting question. I mean, it all comes back down to accountability. Who's actually
and then if you're going to hold them accountable, how do you hold them accountable?
Exactly.
Okay. So, for example, let's say that that we think this is wrong, so we pass a law that says that any government official who because they actually, they set out to harm these companies.
Yes.
Because they didn't like the business they were in, and they did it without changing the law. To me, the people who tried to harm other businesses, who tried to use their power in government to force a legally operating business, to force it out of business by using its power without changing the legality of operating the business, those individuals need to be held to account, because that is, when you get into the area of punishment, there are three reasons that we punish people. One is retribution, where you have closure, where the family members who've been harmed, they get their pound of flesh from the person who harmed their family member or killed them.
Yes.
One is a deterrence, and then the other is to keep law-abiding citizens safe by locking up people who are dangerous.
Yes.
So now I'm going to get to the second one here, and that is the deterrence. So if you are a government employee and you are involved in this, and the law said that if you're caught doing it and convicted, you lose your federal pension.
That's a good deterrent.
Would that be a deterrent that would cause people to say, if you want to do that, you find somebody else to do it?
I think it would be good, but again, it goes back to where there's a will, there's a way.
I know there's a will, there's a way, and there'll always be.
Anyone who's in Congress or the Senate doesn't care about their pension. They're making enough off of stock.
No,
trading.
these are bureaucrats.
I know, but the people who are going to be telling them to do it, like in Obama, as an example, they'll find someone who will. So it's still good as a deterrent. It should still be the case.
Okay.
But I'm still saying that it'll be a good deterrent, and if they get caught, that's what they should have to deal with.
Okay.
But it won't keep it from happening. I don't think.
It will. I understand that, but we're not dealing in absolutes. We're dealing in more likely or less likely.
Yes.
So if you say anyone involved loses their pension, is it more likely or less likely to cause people to not do it?
I think it's more likely, but I don't think it's going to. I don't even think it's going to be a drop in the bucket in terms of actually keeping it from happening.
All right, now
because it's illegal to insider trade.
Okay, now hold on. I just want to. This is interesting.
Yeah.
Because within the administration, if somebody directed the banks to do this, and they are indicted, and they're going to lose their pension, and you may even say, and if you did it all on your own, it's 10 years in prison.
Yeah.
But if you were told to do it, then you don't go to prison if you tell us who told you to do it.
Now that's interesting.
Okay, so I'm saying you roll it all the way up, so that if it's the President of the United States who decides that they want to harm businesses they don't like, that president can go to jail for that and will lose their presidential pension.
I like that.
So what I'm trying to get at here is holding government officials who do things wrong is the part where I think in our society there's the least accountability in the sense of punishment for government officials who abuse their power.
100%.
And that's an interesting question. So go back and read what you brought up again, because it's
the choke point one.
Yeah, the one we're talking about right now. You were talking about Obama did it, but Biden did it too. In that he during COVID, his people told Facebook and a bunch of social media platforms to not report or not allow opposing points of view to be posted on their platforms. Now that is an interesting question. We now know that the opposing points of view were actually legitimate opposing points of view.
Yes.
We didn't know it at the time. In fact, we were led to believe that there were no legitimate opposing points of view. That's what we were told over and over again. And then Mark Zuckerberg went on Rogan and said that there are lots of opposing points of view that would have shown up on Facebook, but we were told not to let them show up. A free society has to allow free speech can be opinions that are false, or opinions that are. Let me change that. Opinions that are wrong. A false opinion and a wrong opinion are the same thing. If they're told by somebody who knows they're false, then they are also dishonest.
Yes.
But they're not necessarily dishonest. They're just incorrect. So anyway, well, I think that is an interesting one. And you say Trump has stopped that. The question is, and I don't know what the answer to my question is, whether or not he's doing anything about the people who did do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And because that gets into the deterrence part.
Yes.
And well, Russ, let's just wrap it up today, and I'll see you next Friday.
Yes, indeed. We still have a lot to cover.
We'll come up with some more topics. So thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.